Thank you. Okay, today is May the 26th. We're going to call this meeting to order now. It is 6:32 p.m. and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland's Police Accountability Commission. Welcome.
Ya vamos a estar. Empieza. Bienvenido.
Sí, gracias. María, por favor.
Sí, hoy es 26 de mayo. Esta es una reunión pública sujeto a las leyes de Oregon y a las reglas administrativas de la ciudad de Portland y será grabada. Hay interpretación disponible para esta reunión. Cuando quieren accesar el español, van a ver el video de los presentadores, pero el audio va a ser reemplazado por los intérpretes. Para accesar esto, por favor, vaya a los controles que están abajo en la pantalla y dele clic en el enlace que dice Language Interpretation y escoja español, Spanish, ¿verdad?
Sí, muchas gracias. We already talked about the language interpretation. We have both Spanish language and ASL interpretation available through Zoom for today's meeting. This is a public meeting subject to the City Administrative Code and conducted under the provisions of Oregon Public Meetings Law. We have chat transcript that they will be included in meeting records for this meeting. We have Zoom questions Q&A function for questions only, no comment. Not all questions will be answered. If answered, both questions and responses will be included in the meeting records for this meeting. Other questions will be included in agenda planning for future PAC and subcommittee meetings. The city also, the city support access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. Thank you. We can move to the next slide. Tonight, we're gonna share the land acknowledgement, and I will read from the Portland metro area rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Catlamet, Clackamas, Panso Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molala, and many other tribes who made their home along the Columbia River. Indigenous people have created communities and summer encampments to harvest and enjoy the plentiful natural resources of the area for the last 11,000 years. We want to recognize that Portland today is a community of many diverse Native people who continue to live and work here. We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities, past, present, future, and are grateful for their ongoing and vibrant presence. We also acknowledge the systematic policies of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many Indigenous and Native American families today. As settlers and guests of these lands, we respect the work of Indigenous leaders and families and pledge to make ongoing efforts to recognize their knowledge, creativity, and resilience. Thank you. I will pass it to the co-chairs to explain and talk about the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I'm happy to do that. Hello, everyone. My name is Lavisa Lloyd. I use she, her pronouns. I am a co-chair of the full PAC during the fact-finding phase, which is the phase that we're in right now. So you can see here, I can just walk you through the phases really quickly. The commission began meeting in December and concluded the organizational phase. of work at the end of March. As part of the organizational phase, the Commission adopted an agenda and scope document that organized the rest of our work. That document defined the current phase as the fact-finding phase. This phase is expected to go until July and includes hearing from key stakeholders, identifying barriers to accountability in Portland presently, and examining systems of accountability from other jurisdictions. As part of our research, it also includes increased community engagement work. Future phases of work will develop the parameters for the new accountability system before the Commission presents that to the City Council in 2023 for their consideration and approval. Today, May 26th, is a work session. We will be hosting Mayor and Police Commissioner Ted Wheeler, who will be giving a presentation, and then we will have some Q&A, and then we will have some time for public comment. Next week, we will have a subcommittee on research meeting on Thursday, June 2nd, followed by a full PAC meeting on June 6th with Mingus Maps, Commissioner Maps visiting, and then the continuation of our work in May and July. We'll continue to work towards the final outcomes of the fact-finding phase, which include drafting some barriers drafting some documents, regarding barriers to accountability, police accountability, in the current process, and summarizing some of the research from experts in other jurisdictions that we'll be working on. All right, this slide is the current project plan for the fact-finding phase. It's not set in stone, it's just to give a general idea. This is really to help members of the public understand how the Commission is going to get from here to there. And you can see that we are under May, where the highlighting is council briefings. This is one of the areas that we had mentioned that we really wanted to work on this particular phase. So you'll see today's meeting is the yellow highlighted text in the little blue box at the center of the screen.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa and Co-Chair. What we're gonna do today, because we have a full agenda, we are going to have a couple minutes to review the community agreements. And also the community agreements that you can see are in a bold highlighted font are the ones that were added to the community agreements, lady. And we want to make sure that we are aware of that, and if we can read it, and then we can go to approve the community agreements. Okay, if I can have an approval, a sign of approval of the community agreements, all the once they are approved, these agreements, please. Okay, thank you very much. The community agreements are reviewed. And now I will pass it to other of the co-chairs to review today's meeting purpose.
Thank you so much, Victoria. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Today's meeting agenda includes a briefing with Mayor Ted Wheeler, who is also the commissioner in charge of the Portland Police Bureau. This briefing consists of 3 parts: a presentation from Mayor Wheeler on police accountability issues, a Q&A period with PAC members with responses from Mayor Wheeler, so we'll have a chance to ask him questions, and then a public comment and questions period where members of the public can give their opinions on the mayor's briefing and ask any questions as well. After the briefing, there will be time for the commission members to discuss all of the briefings we've heard so far and identify some best practices and barriers to police accountability that we feel should go into the PAC's areas of agreement documents. And those areas of agreement documents are both the output for this phase of work and the problem statement for what the PAC is going to try to fix in future phases. There will also be, this is important, there will also be an open public comment period at the end of the meeting for community members to discuss anything under the PAC's agenda or give their stories related to policing and police accountability.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. Now, it is my pleasure to pass the next segment to Dr. Christine Moses for the equity training. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Such an honor to be here this evening. As part of my equity work, we always do agreements, which are our bumpers. We're creating a container in order to have conversations that can be passionate. And the community agreements that you have agreed to help us have those bumpers for this container. I also like to center ourselves. So I'm going to invite you to get comfortable in your chair and to close your eyes or gaze softly down. Breathe in slowly through your nose and hold. And breathe out your mouth. Listen to your heart. What is it telling you this evening? Breathe in slowly through your nose and hold. And breathe out your mouth. Gently open your eyes. Come back into the room. Big stretch up. Ah, yes, lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you so much. I do the centering work so we can connect our mind to our body, to our heart. It's important, it is so critical that we connect our mind to our heart, because we can make decisions that are not compassionate when we are not connected to our heart. And our culture tells us to be objective and to check your emotions at the door. But actually leaning into your intuition and leaning into your body and feeling your body gives you so much more information and allows you to be compassionate. Because compassion is the thing, compassion and empathy are things that are not highly regarded in our culture that are critical to our work. And so I want us to take a look at what it means to live in our culture. And this is from Tema Okun's work, White Supremacy Culture. And I would love for someone to volunteer to read the definition of white supremacy culture, please.
I'll volunteer.
Thank you.
White supremacy culture is the widespread ideology baked into the beliefs, values, norms, and standards of our groups. Many, if not most of them, our communities, our towns, our states, our nation, teaching us both overtly and covertly that whiteness holds value. Whiteness is value. It teaches us that Blackness is not only valueless, but also dangerous and threatening. It teaches us that Indigenous people and communities no longer exist, or if they do, they are to be exercised and romanticized or culturally appropriated as we continue to violate treaties, land rights, and humanity. It teaches us that people south of the border are, quote unquote, illegal.
Thank you so much. So I want to be clear that white supremacy culture is not the KKK. It is, the KKK is an extreme part of it. But our culture, our beliefs, our values, when we say family values, when we say my father was hardworking, well, then I'm going to ask you who's not hardworking. Those assumptions, unexamined assumptions about meritocracy and bootstraps are also part of the myth that keeps white supremacy in place. This is a triggering slide. I understand that. As a white person, you may feel very triggered at this moment. You may feel the fight or flight happening in your body. It may be very uncomfortable for you to be sitting in this. I invite you to lean into the discomfort, because this is actually where learning happens. Leaning into the discomfort of acknowledging where we are in our culture, in our society at this moment, in the skin we're in, is exactly what we are invited to do to create something new and different that has the accountability in service to BIPOC people, BIMPOC, Black, Indigenous, multiracial, Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latine people, and Asian and other neurodiverse people, people with varying abilities, people who have been historically minoritized and are currently minoritized. All of this is held in place with racism. All the other identities that are marginalized and minoritized are held in place by racism, which is why we're focusing on race right now. And we will continue to focus on race, because this is the structure that underpins everything that happens in this country. And so I want us to lean into this discomfort. I want us to understand that white supremacy culture causes trauma in all of us, whether we are white or BIMPOC. And trauma is not an intellectual thing. It lives in our body. And so that's why I'm having you read Resma's book, my grandmother's hands because we understand where trauma lives, which is why I asked you to speak from your heart. I want you to know your heart. And trauma, as well as our biases, can override our intentions. We can do really unintentional and very harmful things to people we love because of the trauma, the historical trauma that's been passed down, the cultural trauma that we swim in every day. And I want us to have a brief conversation about these white supremacy culture characteristics that have been identified by Tema Okun. This document, as I may have said before, allows me to understand what we're trying to excavate out of our systems, out of ourselves, because the work has to start with individuals, right? I don't want you to feel shame and blame and guilt, and yet you will probably take it personally, and I don't want you to take it personally, and I want you to take it personally. Because although we collectively did not create the systems of oppression, we now have ways to identify them, and it is our responsibility and our accountability to change the systems in which we work. And so that's the invitation, that when we are uncomfortable, that we are actually saying, wow, that is the thing that I need to change. When people give feedback, that's why feedback in this commission is so critical, because when we can receive feedback, then we can work on debiasing, on unbiasing, on identifying my biases, identifying my anti-Blackness, and being able to really see where that shows up and then be able to work through it. I'm not asking you to do anything that I have not done. I have had tears. I've had dark nights of the soul. I have, last summer was, So I'm just inviting you into this rich and rewarding place of discomfort, because this is where we get to begin to make the change. And this commission stands to make change. And this is the work that we need to do. So highlighting this document, we've asked for you to read it a couple of 3 times. I'd love to have a conversation about what kind of these characteristics are showing up within the commission right now. Anyone can jump in.
I think from time to time we can fall into the one right way perfectionism. We definitely get hung up on semantics, and not that it's not important to get it right, but I think sometimes we're trying to find the exact perfect way to say everything, and so we often repeat certain things. But I think that might be one that the commission may fall victim to it from time to time.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Connie. Thank you. Yes. And the worship of the written word goes right with that, right? You can wordsmith everything's to death, and then actually nothing changes because you've spent all your time wordsmithing. It's a trap. It can be a trap. There are different forms of knowledge. It could be a video. It could be a poem. It could be an experiential thing. It doesn't have to be a written document. It may need to be a written document, but there may be other ways to understand lived experience than just through a written document, which is why the Community Engagement Committee is going to be so critical, because we want to hear those lived experiences. That's what we're in service to. And so we're going to need to be able to listen to those deeply and in different ways. Commissioner Glenn, please.
I'd just like to add some of the things that I feel that we're running into is doing things the way other people have done them or other organizations. I think it's very difficult for people to not do that, but I think it's a trap of repeating the same thing. So that was one of the ones I thought of. Thank you.
You so very much. Absolutely. You know, if we're always looking back and not looking forward or trying to imagine, right? I want to use some of this equity training to imagine something different, then we could really get stuck in the past. Thank you so very much. Commissioner Angie.
Thank you. This is kind of something that I've felt in that who is qualified. I mean, I know that I definitely have imposter syndrome, and coming onto this this commission, I was completely humbled by some of the experience, but it also made me feel like, well, how am I qualified? And if we really think about it, all of us are completely qualified because we are representing our communities in different ways. Even though I am not representing a specific organization or whatnot, that question always makes me feel kind of small in this setting. So.
Thank you so much for raising that. Really appreciate that. Catherine, Commissioner Catherine.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. I think the one that I keep working on personally is this progress is more and quantity over quality, and how we're measuring our progress and how our progress is being perceived by others. That, you know, the fact that we've taken time to build relationships and to, you know, consider how we want to do the work. I think, you know, if folks aren't careful, they could say, well, we're just beginning now. We haven't really done anything. And I think that the deadline we have creates that the pressure on us, and you know, the sort of pushes us to go to that place when I think we really need to give ourselves credit for having done a lot of work so far, and a lot of quality work, and having made a lot of progress. But I think that maybe outside observers would not measure our work in the same way. So I think it's something I struggle with, and really try to, you know, hold myself back from saying, but we need to be doing this, this, and this. I just try to be present in what we are doing and appreciate what we are doing.
Yes, yes. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the qualifications, the imposter syndrome, the sense of urgency, we've got to do this. It's, I mean, when I was hired to do this work, my first question was 18 months. Are you kidding? And I stepped into the work understanding that we need to go through a storming and norming process so we can build our relationships, so we can then move at the speed of trust, because that's what we're doing. We're learning how to trust each other, and that's as fast as you can go, is learning and going at the speed of trust. So thank you for that. Commissioner Lovisa.
Sure, I wanted to say so many great points have been made already. Yeah, and something that you brought up, Christine, that I've seen on other white supremacy culture lists is, yeah, that sense of urgency, and like, which is very much also tied to fear, and it kind of goes along with like a lot of the perfectionism and kind of like not necessarily having a culture of gratitude and of sort of looking around and saying like, you know, wow, like everyone has done so much work. so far, but sort of pointing primarily at like, well, this is the work that we haven't done. And I've felt that fear myself, absolutely. Like I've felt the sense of urgency. And I think that I have also enforced a sense of urgency sometimes on the group. And I have always kind of, I feel like I've regretted it a little bit because, you know, when we have that, when there's that fear in the room, it really suppresses discourse that is really valuable discourse. And, you know, in particular, if we want to have like a consensus decision making model, then like having that continued sense of urgency really makes it difficult to take the time to like be inclusive and to encourage like, you know, democratic and like thoughtful decision making and to think long term, you know, and consider the consequences of what we're doing. So I definitely recognize that.
Yeah, so much wisdom there. So this is what we mean when we say the white supremacy culture is driving us to places where we don't want to go. And again, I want white folks in the audience in this commission to understand I am not picking on you. This is not a personal attack. It is the culture that we're in. And as you can tell by all the degrees behind me, I'm really good at perfectionism and, you know, higher, better, faster, stronger. And I was, you know, an elite athlete that was training for the Olympics, and I know how to do white supremacy culture really well. And I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to find the space and the grace in order for me to debias myself. And that's the invitation that I have for all of us. So I just so appreciate this. I would love for us to do a visualization about what I'm talking about. So again, pretty please get comfy in your chair. I invite you to close your eyes or gaze softly down. This visualization journey is about you. You are the only thing you can control. What does yielding power in your position look like to you? How would you act differently? What does it feel like in your body to yield power? Where does it show up in your body? How can you overcome that feeling of less than, of loss? Is that feeling of loss real? Does yielding power really make you less of a person? How is sharing power empowering to you? Can you find joy and comfort in letting go of perfection, the need to lead, and the need to be right? What does letting go feel like in your body? Sit with this feeling. Welcome it back into your life over and over. Letting go is powerful. Breathe in slowly through your nose and hold. And breathe out your mouth. Gently open your eyes. Big stretch up. Thank you so much for this conversation, for this deep, deep work. I invite you in to visualize the letting go of perfection and all of that. Stepping into that new expansive place that's in you. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moses, for the training. Thank you very much. We are grateful to have you here. And now our next item in the agenda, I have the honor to introduce our Portland Mayor, Ted Wheeler. He was elected in 2016 and re-elected in 2020. Among all the periods and things that he oversees the Portland Police. Mayor Wheeler, please welcome. And now we are all yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I've had a couple of problems today with my Zoom skill set, so I'm glad it's all working out. First of all, good evening and thank you for having me tonight. And I especially just want to thank you for your service in this important work. Your task is no easy feat, creating a new, really, system of accountability that meets both legal standards as well as some very high community expectations in what I would describe as a relatively short period of time. It's a huge, huge undertaking. And I applaud you all for taking this so seriously and taking time away from other things in your life. It's clear that the time and the energy that you're dedicating to this commission is significant. And I want you to know that all of us on the City Council really appreciate it. In preparation for tonight's meeting, I was given 3 questions from the group that you asked me to do my best to answer. So if you'd like, I'll just jump into those questions. I'll read the questions as they were presented to me, and then I'll go ahead and give you my best answer. The first question was actually really difficult. The first question was, describe the role that I play as mayor in Portland's current accountability system as police commissioner. As police commissioner, I, and by extension, everyone in my office is in, well, not everybody, but my public safety folks, Stephanie's on this call and she's very engaged in this. We're in frequent communication with the Portland Police Bureau on a number of issues. And those issues include discipline as well as accountability issues. Most investigations, whether they're conducted internally by internal affairs or externally by IPR, actually only involve me once the investigation is complete. And most people don't know that I am in the dark as much as anybody in the public while those investigations are ongoing. There's a reason for that. And the reason is that I am the last voice in the accountability chain. And therefore I cannot be biased. I cannot be provided information prior to the formal process. And I'll just tell you, it's very frustrating to be the mayor on one hand and be asked my opinion on particular issues, but on the other hand, be intentionally walled off from information related to the investigation and not wanting to prejudge a situation where I may be called upon at the end to arbitrate the conclusion and the discipline involved in that. So here's how it kind of works. No two situations are exactly the same. That's why I say kind of. But for more serious incidents, let's say like an officer involved shooting, I am notified immediately after the incident occurs. And that's any time of day or night, regardless of where I am. I'm often called by the chief. Sometimes if the chief is not available, I'll be called by somebody else who's a senior level official in the Portland Police Bureau. Oftentimes somebody will reach out to my chief of staff and then reach out to me. But typically it happens very, very quickly after an incident occurs. And then I'm more fully briefed once preliminary facts are known. I shouldn't even call those facts. Once preliminary information comes our way, I get briefed. In some cases, I will actually visit a scene. Sometimes a member of my team will visit a scene, and that's depending upon a variety of factors. But for most investigations, I would say my involvement really begins once the case is scheduled to go before the PRB, the Police Review Board. I am not a member of PRB. Obviously, I'm not a voting member of the PRB meetings, but my staff does attend to hear the results of the investigations and recommendations from those who are voting members of the PRB. When PRB recommends corrective action or discipline, there will be a predetermination meeting that I can attend to consider whether any mitigation presented warrants a change to PRB's recommended discipline. And after considering all of the evidence, if I do not believe the proposed discipline is appropriate, I have the authority to direct the chief to impose different discipline. And that has happened. Maybe before I jump into the second question, I'll just see if anybody has specific questions about what I just said. And Victoria, I assume you're facilitating that, or I can just go right into the second question and we can wait till the end or whatever your preference is.
Yes, Mayor, and the agenda will leave questions until the end of your presentation. If it's that okay?
Of course, yeah, whatever your preference is. So
thank you.
I'll go ahead and just work my way through it. The second question was what kinds of decisions I make in regard to discipline, termination, and the like. I sort of answered this generally in the first question, so I'll just elaborate to say that while I do have the authority to direct disciplinary decisions, it's an authority I do not take lightly. The PRB process includes very detailed discussion of case facts, as well as mitigating factors by all voting members, and that includes community members, by the way. This requires a tremendous amount of time, preparation and work, particularly for serious cases that involve violence and death, which I will just sort of point out as an aside, and it may be relevant to the future of the work you do. It can be very traumatizing to review the facts of these cases for those who do it, including representatives of the community. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for the perspectives and the recommendations that are made by members of the PRB, and that weighs heavily in favor of following the recommendations of PRB most of the time. However, there have been cases in which I felt strongly that the discipline was not sufficient and have exercised my authority accordingly. The third question asks for my reflection on the appeal process when the City Council hears appeals of misconduct cases that aren't resolved at the CRC level, the Citizen Review Commission level. And again, I have a great deal of respect for the community members who volunteer and dedicate a lot of their time and their effort to this work. I try to meet with the co-chairs on a regular basis. Typically, we meet on at least a quarterly basis. Sometimes we're able to work in more meetings on a month-to-month basis. But it's important to me personally to be connected with and listen to the leadership of CRC. They're people I trust, and I respect the work that they do and the work their colleagues do. The appeals process is what I would describe, when I'm trying to explain this to people who really don't follow politics, don't really follow city government. They're like, well, what are you guys doing? What I tell them is that this is high-level volunteerism. It's particularly technical. It's an important part of what I think is already a complicated system. It requires volunteers to navigate areas of constitutional law, criminal procedure, employment law, administrative law, and basic investigatory principles, just to name a few of the aspects. And so there's a steep learning curve, and we're asking a lot of people who do this work. And that's just the process that leads up to the council hearing. So when something comes to the council, I've sort of had this feeling that on one hand, we're asking too much of unpaid volunteer community members. Honestly, the level of work required, the level of self-education that has to take place, we're asking a lot of unpaid community volunteers. With regard to the council's role in the appeal process, very few of these issues get to the city council. But I've been really honest with everybody that I don't think these cases are well suited for that particular forum. The city council sessions are packed agendas. I was in council yesterday from 9:30 till I think 5:30. With a short break in between. Today, council was in session on one item for 4.5 hours this afternoon. And we're all just people. We're trying to do our best, but attention spans can be limited. People can get tired, hungry, cranky. They can be concerned about other work that's piling up while the council is underway. And so I just sort of have this sense that council sessions with packed agendas are designed to legislate on this wide variety of public issues, and they're not particularly conducive to the time and specialization needed to decide complex cases like this. And again, we're talking about often really complex, voluminous case files, very short timelines for decisions to be made. There are often issues where the CRC is seeking additional guidance from council members who frankly have spent less time being able to understand the complexity of the issues that are involved. So sort of my bottom line thinking is trying to shoehorn important appeals into the current city council system really just isn't the best solution if you're looking for a comprehensive and thorough review. And I think there's been some real frustration on part of CRC members who dedicate so much of their time and their energy to specific cases. it gets to the council, we look at the basic facts, we make a decision. And I think sometimes the CRC members feel that the council really didn't give the case the justice or the time or the energy and attention that it deserved. And to be blunt, that's probably true, just based on the factors that I just mentioned. So I hope I've answered your 3 questions fully and as thoroughly as I can, and I'll certainly hand it back to you to facilitate any Q&A you may have.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. We'll now take questions and let Mayor Wheeler respond to them. Please keep your questions brief. Please allow me to facilitate this Q&A, and please ask questions that really help the Commission move towards identifying barriers and best practices, which is the purpose of this phase of work today. Thank you. Commissioner Debbie, would you like to ask your question now?
I think it was answered, but while since you called on me, I'll take advantage of that. So Mayor Wheeler, can you give some examples without naming names of some of the factors that have made you decide to deviate from the discipline that was recommended through the Bureau process?
Yes. So one of the biggest hangups I run into is what's called precedence. And you're well familiar with that. So we have to be consistent in our standards of discipline. But here's where the moral and ethical problem comes in for me. Just because somebody was too light on a disciplinary action previously should not bind my hands. I was duly elected by the people of this city to be mayor and to use my best judgment. And we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And I am kind of a rigid guy. I believe you either follow the rules or you don't follow the rules. To me, maybe I see the world too much in terms that are maybe too strict for the reality of life, but it bugs me when I see somebody get away with something that undercuts the credibility of the entire agency at a time when the credibility of policing is it's in question nationally. We should be bending over backwards to be doubly accountable to the public. And I use we, I'm the police commissioner, so I'm part of it. And so where I have differed with PRB or with chiefs is usually because I believe that we should set a stronger example. Policing is a high calling. Police officers are entrusted with lethal force, which makes them different from any other public servants. And therefore, the standards should be exceptionally high. I have no apologies for holding people to a high standard. And so just because somebody else decided that 2 weeks of leave without pay was sufficient, I don't feel beholden to that. And I realize that if I pick a higher standard like termination, and I realize there's always grounds for an appeal. And I'm okay with that because that's the way the system works here in America. People have the right to appeal. But I believe as the mayor and as the police commissioner, I also have the right to mete out the discipline that I think warrants it. And if there's one thing that really bugs me more than anything else, it's when people lie. And there is a truthfulness standard that police officers are held to. It's taken very, very seriously in the policing profession. Given the authority entrusted in police officers, truthfulness is essential. It is a core requirement of the job. And if that is violated, I take it really seriously. And so there's always those who say, but Mayor, if you do this, it doesn't fit with the precedent that's been set by your predecessors over a period of years. People will say you've changed tactics midstream. And to that, I say bullshit. Oh, I guess I'm not supposed to say it. I haven't changed tactics. I'm a new mayor and I come in with my own agenda and my own background and my own experiences and my own perspectives. And therefore, that's what I do. Longer answer than you wanted, Debbie, sorry, but it's an important issue.
Thank you, Mayor. See if there's more questions.
And if I could, just while you're waiting,
Sure.
Madam Moderator, I'm not alone in this. There's a lot of rank and file police officers who want the standard to be high. They've picked this profession because they believe in it and they believe that it's an important profession. And they know that if there are people who are allowed to skate, it makes them all look bad and they all end up holding the bag as a result. So I just want you to know it's not me versus the police. It's often many officers who feel exactly the same way I do, that the standard should be high.
Thank you. Commissioner Catherine, please.
Thank you, Catherine McDowell. I use she, her pronouns, and appreciate your speaking with us tonight, Mayor Wheeler. My question I had really follows up on presentations we had at our last meeting from IPR and the CRC, and both of them, it was noteworthy to me that both of them pointed out that the lack of transparency was an issue they thought with the current system. They independently pointed that out and pointed out different aspects of, for example, the PRB being closed or complainants not having access to the file, even though they're presenting their case to the CRC, they're obviously at a disadvantage if they don't get to see their own files. So those are a couple of examples we were given. I guess my question to you, I understand there's some probably legal or contractual reasons behind that, but do you see any areas where additional transparency could be added to the system? And if so, where would you suggest that we look?
Yeah, that's a great question, Catherine. Thank you for asking it. It's a really tough question because there's two important values that are competing directly with each other. The first value is openness, transparency, and accountability, which is more important now than ever in an age of social media when information and misinformation and rumor can get out to the community and people harden really, really quickly into their perspectives. The competing value is due process. And I hope we never get to the point where we are so determined to make a quick judgment that we're willing to sacrifice the right judgment. And these cases, particularly the more inflammatory ones, often require a lot more investigation, a lot more interviews. There was a case not too long ago where that was very, very well publicized, that the public was very, very eager to get information on, the media was eager to get information on. And I can tell you that what happened was once the investigation started, it expanded. It moved beyond what the public knew and went into a completely different area involving other individuals. And you can't necessarily go out and tell the public that the scope of the investigation has just expanded because you frankly don't want to tip people off that the scope of the investigation has expanded or that other individuals might now be involved. And so you've got these constantly competing things, and this is nothing new. I mean, it's always been the case, but you asked me a specific question. Where can we be more transparent? I feel that the Police Bureau has been too cautious in its description of things that happen. And it became really obvious. We had a mass shooting a year ago, and we had national press interested in the situation, and they wanted to know, well, why aren't you guys telling us more? You know, other cities tell us a lot more the day after what's going on. And we sort of have this prevailing culture of don't screw up the investigation by giving out information that later turns out to be false. And we've seen that in a couple of cases where Witnesses, don't accurately remember certain things, and when a video shows up later, it turns out that something very different happened. The same thing can happen with the police, obviously, since we don't have body-worn cameras deployed widely, and we don't have cameras on the cars deployed widely. So the culture of the Portland Police Bureau, and I would say generally the council, has always been, be very, very careful to make sure that what you give to the public is 100% accurate, so it doesn't screw up the investigation. I think there's a middle ground, and it requires a cultural shift. I think it's okay to come out the next day after an event that's really concerning the community and say, as of this moment, this is what we know. And say, 2 witnesses said they saw this, 1 witness said they saw that. We don't know all the facts. It's still under investigation. The facts may change based on additional information coming out. But I feel that we're secretive to the point that people think we're hiding something. And we live in an age and time where people are really, really sensitive to the idea that they're either getting misinformation or a lack of information or being sold a line of BS. And so I would like to see us, and I've talked to the chief, and he and I have had lots of good conversations about this, about providing more information to the public earlier about serious situations, even if we don't know all the facts, but then just be honest about what we don't know. And then that at least tamps down, there were situations I think we could have de-escalated sooner had we gone out with information that we knew more quickly, rather than waiting for this whole disciplinary process to play itself out. Because you guys know it can take months. And by the time people get the information, they may have already forgotten what the issue was. They just remember they felt like they were being deceived, or they felt like the police bureau or the mayor or whoever wasn't acting with credibility or honesty. And it's that stuff that undercuts people's faith in government more than somebody screwing up and then being held accountable for it later. It's just the sense that government isn't being honest or transparent.
Thank you. Commissioner Connie, please.
Your last statement is a perfect segue to my question. I'm curious, as a mayor and the Portland Police Commissioner, do you see that as being a dual role that is equitable? Do you often find conflict in wearing both of those hats? Like, how is that something, how do those 2 things hold hands well?
Connie, thank you for asking that question. It's almost liberating to have that question asked. Having the mayor be the police commissioner is the dumbest thing in the history of governance. It is a complete conflict. And where it's really a conflict is in a situation where the community is deeply concerned, emotional, distraught, fearful, and needs leadership. They need to hear from their elected mayor, and people who've moved here from other places, they expect to hear things from the mayor on a significant issue. And the idea that the mayor has to keep his mouth shut because he's the tail end of a disciplinary process is almost like people don't care. They don't care. But if you believe in due process, and I do, then there's that conflict. So I get to meet with the Charter Review Commission, separate hardworking commission from you guys, tomorrow, actually, I believe. And I am really hoping that Portland gets rid of its one-of-a-kind model. I can't think of another mayor in America, another big city mayor, where the mayor is the police commissioner. It's just a total conflict of interest. Terrible. Dumbest idea ever. So thank you for asking and giving me this moment to vent. The mayor needs to be public, transparent, accountable, and speak to the public at a time when the public may be wounded or hurting or needing reassurance. But you're handcuffed as mayor by this police commissioner role.
And could you have stepped down? Like, do you have that option or what?
You can transfer the authority to another commissioner, and it's been tried. And it doesn't work because at the end of the day, Sam Adams tried. He works with me on he actually wanted to get out from under the policing role because it takes about 80% of your time. And because it's a big job, it's an important job. And he tried to get out of it. And as soon as there was an officer involved shooting, people said, look, you can't escape this responsibility. Just, and I'm being pejorative, but quote, dumping it on a different commissioner doesn't fly. You're the mayor. You need to stand in front of the public and be accountable on these issues. So ultimately, Sam had to take it back. And that was a learning experience for all of us, subsequent mayors, that you may think you can get rid of it, but you really can't. Under this form of government, the mayor must be accountable for the most challenging of all bureaus, which is the police bureau. And I'm sure that's, the police bureau is the difficult one in every city because policing is complex and people are very, very engaged when it comes to policing issues.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Now we're gonna pass it to Commissioner Sophia.
Thank you, Commissioner Wheeler, for being with us. I have a question for you to kind of go back to Connie's question and your frustration about how can you get, you says you can't figure out how to get out from under the being the police commissioner. I mean, how can we change that? I mean, what are your suggestions? What do we need to do to change that?
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. I have to ask you, what is the picture behind you? I love it.
It's a picture in Turkey. It's a national park in Turkey.
It is absolutely astounding. I hope I'll have a chance to see that someday. That is actually incredible. So the way we get out from under it is change the charter. The charter is the document created by the public. City Council does not create it. It's created by the public, and it dictates how we govern ourselves in this community. And coincidentally, the Charter Review Commission meets every 10 years. This is the 10th year they're meeting, and they're going to recommend changes to the city charter for the November ballot. And my complete hope and expectation is that the mayor we need a structure similar to what other cities have, where they have a commissioner of policing who's beholden to all of the elected. So it's not an elected official who serves in that role, but the electeds hold accountability through that appointed position. And I don't know if that's where the Charter Commission is going to go or not, but the current structure is worst case scenario. The Charter Review Commission has the ability to change it. They're meeting right now. They're taking public commentary. And Commissioner Sophie, if you feel strongly about it, I'm sure a letter or just a brief email even to the commission from you would make a big impression.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Is there, Commissioner Dan, please.
Hello, good evening, Mayor Wheeler. You know me, I'm Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. And this is my first time talking to you as an appointed city official, talking to you as an elected official. So it's an interesting new dynamic for us today. My question has to do with making sure the new board's findings will stick. And you sort of touched on this a little bit already, but there have been a total of 4 citizen review committee appeals that made it to council over the last 20 years. And you've been part of 3 of them. First one you heard was a man with mental health issues who was tasered multiple times by an officer. The majority of council found there was insufficient evidence to prove misconduct. At the second one, a majority of council found that an officer retaliated against a woman who took a picture of an armored vehicle and made a face at them. The chief and the police review board ignored this council's finding, and the officer received a letter of reprimand instead of 2 days off without pay, as required by the discipline matrix. The third hearing ended with a unanimous council finding that an officer failed to take a police report about a stolen vehicle, thus violating policy. The discipline for that officer has never been published in a PRB report, raising questions about whether the council's final say was respected. So how can you ensure that the new board's findings will be upheld as envisioned by the charter?
Thank you for the question, Dan, and it's good to see you in this capacity, and thank you again. I don't know where you get the time, but it's good to see you in this capacity, and thank you for your service. The city council, as I mentioned in answering the questions, and I think I was as clear and blunt as I could possibly be. The city council is not the right place to adjudicate these complex cases. It really is better served through bodies that have the technical knowledge and the time and the energy to focus on these cases, because they deserve that focus. The standard of review used by the city council is a fairly low threshold. I think you'll agree, Dan, and I may not be getting it exactly right, but it's a reasonableness standard. I don't know if that's the right technical term, but could one, looking at the facts as presented, reasonably reach the conclusion they did? That doesn't mean we agree with the decision or disagree with the decision. It just means if somebody's looking at all these facts, could they have reasonably come to that conclusion? Reasonable, of course, is a squishy standard as well. And so the council, I think we were pretty clear, sort of hated each and every one of those cases coming before the council. And the first one, I did, it was alongside then Commissioner Saltzman. And I remember him saying in one of his last meetings, these should never come to city council. It's just, we don't have the capacity to do them justice. And I'm heavily paraphrasing Dan, so I apologize if I'm not getting his nuance exactly correct, but I agree with that. So how can I assure you? You guys get to dictate what the process is. That's why it's such a big challenge and a huge responsibility. Is the council is frankly relying on your leadership to come up with what this disciplinary process 2.0 is. It's a big responsibility. It's huge.
Thank you. And I'm gonna read some of the questions that was put in the public, but before that, is that any other commissioner that has a question? Yes, Commissioner Sima, please.
Greetings, everybody. Greetings, Mayor Wheeler. Glad you're on board with us over here today. My question, it kind of piggybacks off of Dan's, but it focuses more on our commission and how we're supported at the end result by your office. With Portland Police's racist history and present bias and persecuting of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of color, these are still present numbers that are incredibly skewed. The population within Multnomah County systems are overly representative of these specific communities, and including, the extraordinary use of force arrests against houselessness, which has been, throughout your 2 terms as mayor. So this has caused, like yours and Portland Police Bureau's reputation to be intertwined in dysfunction with, both even the US DOJ and Portlanders itself. So it's that in essence has set the table for local and national media's mixed portrayal of the city. And we all bear the negative brunt force when it comes to that, and that adds the pressure on being able to succeed on your end, on our end, and being able to put this board together. So with what we're tasked to create here, and the compilation of this commission being very compelling with credibility, I don't speak of myself, but I definitely speak of my colleagues over here. How will you offer support to this commission's recommendations for this new board, which this city desperately needs? What are the functions within your city and your staffing? What are your plans when it comes to our results as a commission? What are the forms of support you're going to be ready to offer this commission once we wrap up?
Yeah, Commissioner Sina, thank you very much for the question and the directness. As you know, I don't like to bullshit, so I appreciate you being really honest and straightforward.
I don't either.
Thank you. It's actually deeply refreshing. I don't know where this process is going to end. That's sort of my honest answer to you. I fully expect my team and me to support the findings of this commission. We were asked early on. The support we've tangibly been asked for is make sure that we have funding, that we have facilitation, that we have the support we need to be able to do the work that we do, that we have access to the people that we need access to. And I hope that you see that we have lived up to that request. This is something that the public has directed. This is not a Ted Wheeler idea or a city council idea. The public voted on this and they directed it. And so that's what we're going to do. And so you should expect that I will be supportive of your work. And that's almost independent of whether or not I agree with it. The public has already spoken. The process is already underway. And my job is to make sure it's as effective as possible. And there's analogous examples out there where I have not supported something previously, that once it's done, my job is to make sure it's as successful as possible.
And Mayor, if you can hear me, sorry, this is Stephanie Howard. I would just add to that my contact information is in the chat. I'm absolutely more than willing to talk with any of you or support you or hear any ideas you have for ways we can continue to support you. I work very closely with the community safety division folks. And so, we're constantly making sure that, that you all have what you need to be successful here. So I just wanted to add that and open that invitation up for anyone to reach out if they ever have any concern or any questions. And then I will say, Mayor, I just want to give you a time check because I know that.
Yeah, no, I know I'm already hopelessly late.
Mayor, Stephanie and Mayor Wheeler, I just want to read the questions from the public just because I wanted to read it before giving the word to Stephanie. Is that 2 questions from the mayor from the audience, and the first one is the Portland mayor hasn't always been the police commissioner. If it is such a terrible idea, why haven't you gave the job to another commissioner? And I know you touched on that. And the second was the mayor doesn't have to be the police commissioner. You could hand the periods of another member of the council. And I don't know, you have time for the last commissioner that hasn't participated. She's our co-chair, Commissioner Lovisa.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, Commissioner.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wheeler, for being with us, and thank you for your support in all of these efforts. Great recommendations. Thank you so much for all of your recommendations and just for your truth-telling today. I wanted to ask, what we're charged with is really making an independent board and ideally a civilian board. And one of the things that independent board is going to be doing is making some recommendations to Portland Police Bureau. And I was wondering if you had any ideas, suggestions, recommendations, if you've seen any times when an outside entity or an independent entity has made recommendations to PPB and had that be a successful conversation, or if you have any ideas about how to improve the chances that will be a successful conversation.
Yeah, great question, Commissioner Lovisa. I do have input on this, and I hope you'll take my opinion to heart, because I've watched successful community oversight and I've watched hopelessly dysfunctional oversight. And by the way, you guys are getting really good marks, and I hope you're seeing that from the public. From where I sit, and I'm not involved in the day-to-day of your work, but what I hear is good. It's really positive, and I applaud you for that, because you're doing some thorny stuff. But one example that works so far, it's early on, is the FITCOG, the Focused Intervention Team Community Oversight Group. It works because it's a good mix of people who have different perspectives. The Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing has largely worked, but it's been hard to keep people. And now I'm just going to be really blunt and tell you which people it's hardest to keep. It's hardest to keep people who generally support policing and police officers, because they're often, what I hear, and I'm just going to report to you what I hear from people, is they do not feel protected. They do not feel that their opinions are well received, and they do not feel that, and this is why we need good facilitators like Victoria. They don't feel like their perspectives are respected, appreciated, or protected in the public discourse. And so my advice, and this is just unsolicited advice, and you can deep six it or whatever, is as you go forward, really seek out perspectives of people who you may or may not agree with, who may have different perspectives around policing generally. And that is important because credibility is ultimately really important. I'll give another example, and Dan and others may disagree with me on this, and that's fine. We're all friends here, and we should be able to disagree. The COAB started off as a really great vision of people coming together from community and working on police accountability and oversight. It was specific to the settlement agreement, but it was kind of the idea behind it. And slowly but surely, people left because they felt that it was not a safe, welcoming environment for people with all perspectives. And as those people left, and then they went out and told other people, it became, in my opinion, more and more dysfunctional, and ultimately lost its credibility, and ultimately was seen as very, very one-sided in its approach to accountability. And that hurt it. And that's just my opinion. Others have very different opinions and may disagree with me. But as you do this, really try to remember that people in Portland have very wildly, there's a whole spectrum of views around public safety generally, around policing specifically, around policies. And in order for there to be credibility in any democratic institution, there has to be the ability to hear different perspectives. And that's, that goes for city council too, and the work we do. But that's my only advice.
Mayor, thank you. I'm gonna read one question and then give it to Sophia. This is the third question from the public. And the third question said, did you support changing the standard of review to preponderance of the evidence? And then Sophia, do you want to ask your question and he can answer both?
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have to.
I'll answer the question by, look, the standard of review, as I said, I already went on the record, and I said the standard of review is the threshold is low. The current standard of review is reasonableness. Now, if you go to the higher standard of review, preponderance of evidence, your city council better know as much as you and PRB and everybody else about the technical details of a specific case. And I'm just telling you, the city council is the wrong place for this. I oppose the city council being the final arbiter on CRC appeals. I just don't think it's the right body. It's like sending Supreme Court, well, not Supreme Court, but it's like sending circuit court appeals to the DMV. It's just the wrong place. So that's kind of my perspective on it. You can change the standard of review all day long, but the city council is the wrong place to hear the case because they're not going to give it the time, the energy, the focus, the attention and have the technical knowledge and the time to be able to give the case the attention that it will deserve.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And I know we have to let you go. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
That was a good conversation, though. Thank you. I actually appreciate it. I hope you'll have me back if I could be of help. My comment earlier was serious. If there is something not working in terms of support from my office or the city council, please do let Stephanie know. And I think Stephanie, did you put your contact in the chat there, I hope?
It is in the chat. Yep.
Cool. Let us know. I want you guys to be successful. You're volunteering a ton of time and energy. And I want whatever you do to really work well. That's the most important thing. So thanks for having me. Have a good night.
Good night, Mayor. Thank you for being here and answering the questions.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now our next, we will now take public comment of the issues discussed in the Mayor Wheeler's briefing. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 2 minutes in length at most, and raise their hand in Zoom if you'd like to speak. I will wait a minute or so, or maybe there's not anybody. Since I don't see, I may be wrong, but I don't see anybody from the public asking any questions, what we will do is 7:59. We will come back at, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Angie.
I just wanted to make a question or a statement, but I know that Mayor Wheeler had recommended that we make sure to have opposing opinions of what we're saying. But I also want to take into consideration the members of the public that voted for this accountability commission and what I believe they voted for in this commission when we're making our considerations and taking our comments. So anyway, I just wanted to put that on the record as something that I didn't say directly to Mayor Wheeler, because I know that he was pressed for time and I didn't want to keep him any longer. But you know, we are charged by the public, not by the city commission. So I just want to remind everybody of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Angie. And yeah, this for public comment, if there is questions from anybody that is as public. I know Commissioner Sima say we also welcome questions from the media or the press here. We welcome any questions and this section. Do we have any public comment or question or for the media or press? I don't see any, but then what we will do is we will take a 10 minutes break. Is 8:01. We will come back at 8:11. Thank you. Thank you. And our next in the agenda is our discussion on barriers to accountability and best practices. in the current system. This is an open discussion and we ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief. Anyone can speak multiple times, but should take no more than 2 minutes each time they speak. Be facilitated, raise hands on Zoom and allow the facilitator to call on people in the way that promotes conversation, keeps things moving and allows everyone to speak. Please remember that facilitators use a weighted stack and will not always call on the first person to raise their hand. Be constructive, look forward and discuss how to make the commission's work more successful in the future of each question. I will also pass it to one of the co-chairs for any comment or that they may have.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in with that.
Thank you.
First of all, again, thank you everyone so much for your time tonight. So one of the goals of this phase is that we will eventually be drafting and putting together a document related to barriers around in police accountability, and this conversation and future conversations we'll have will help us start to frame those our areas of agreement. So basically we're hoping we can have a conversation where people might kind of like throw out like, here are some things that we're doing right now that I think really don't work, or here are some things that really do work, and people can agree or disagree, and we can start to get a sense of where we have consensus around areas of agreement based on people agreeing. So it is really important and really helpful and really useful, even if you feel like the point that you would make has already been said, for you to chime in and say, yes, I agree with that. I think that's really important. You know, even if 5 people agree, it's really, really good and really helpful to have all 5 people say they agree or disagree. So please speak up and, you know, make your voice heard.
Thank you, Co-Chair and Commissioner Lovisa. Then we open for the conversation.
Well, I'm happy to kind of kick the discussion off.
Sure.
I was taking some notes on Monday, and I think if anybody else has notes from Monday or notes from today, this is a great time to pull them out and to refer to them. I'd kind of been doing it like barrier, best practice, and I think that IPR and CRC gave us a lot of really good information. So I thought maybe I would just sort of go down some of the things that I had listed, and we can see if, you know, if folks agree, had other ideas or other things they wrote down. I definitely did not capture everything that they mentioned, so I'm, you know, hoping everyone will help me out here. In terms of best practices, the mediation practice was something that was mentioned as something that is really useful and helpful and successful in some situations. Let's see, a best practice. Oh, investigators speaking multiple languages. Definitely a best practice. Oh, a barrier. I think this was at PRBs. The police always have more votes than the civilians. Sounds like a big barrier. Data crush is another big barrier, and that's a barrier that's probably just, it's only going to get worse with the adoption of body cameras. But it also might be a best practice. Maybe that sort of is something that sort of falls into both. A barrier, officers often don't show up to hearings. That is the culture, is that they don't show up. A best practice from CRC, the review of the file for completeness and deliberation on whether the file is complete before deliberating on findings related to the file. I thought it seemed like a really, really good practice. Barrier, it's expensive to be a volunteer. It means that people working with CRC often are limited to people who are available in the afternoon. And it means that one person can swing things or sway things enormously just because they're available. And I think this is something Mayor Wheeler touched on as well, which is just that it's an enormous amount of work for volunteers. And as volunteers, I think we can all appreciate that. And I think he might have even said it's too much work for volunteers. And then additionally, the issues regarding training, special training, vicarious traumatization, and all the things that go along with that. So those are some of the ideas that I had. I would love to hear if other people had caught certain things, if you agree, if you disagree, what notes you have. Please chime in.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa, and I will go to Commissioner Sophia and then Commissioner Angie. Thank you.
One of the things that was consistent for both with Mayor Taylor and also Wheeler. Oh gosh, my brain is all screwy. Sorry. Anyway, there were some common things. The groups on last Monday said that they didn't have the support, and he was talking about whatever support we can give us, but you know, the support that the full-time employees have that we don't, the services. They were talking about some of the mental health services, some of the HR services. If we could get those services for the commission and the new board, similar to those, I'm not saying health benefits per se, but definitely the counseling services and all those other kind of support services, including my brain just went dead. But anyway, you get the gist. I was going to ask him about that before he left, but that's something that I think we need to really look into, specifically what services we could use as a commission that are not offered to us as volunteers, but are support that the city officials get. So that might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Angie, would you like to say something?
Well, I just asked it I just didn't know the definition of data crush, and it was defined in the comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I will pass it to Commissioner Connie and then Commissioner Lovisa. Thank you.
I actually think Lovisa had her hand up first. So
it's okay. We just, because we said you have it.
Okay. Forgive me if this has been covered and I maybe missed it, but I'm not entirely clear on how, if at all, we'll be collaborating with the other organizations that we met with in our last meeting. Are we clear how we are different from them, or we are to be working with them? And again, maybe that was something we've covered, but as they were, both of groups were speaking, I was just kind of wondering, like, what makes us different, and how will we be either replicating or collaborating with their work?
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Connie. And Commissioner Lovisa, or you wanna say something, or the staff, CSD support staff?
Just to answer Connie's question, the output of this commission, if accepted by the city council, is to replace the independent police review and citizen review committee, which was discussed on Monday, or to subsume it into some way if you so choose. It's up to the commissioners what that recommendation is. To get to that recommendation, both the IPR staff, who are city staff, as well as the CRC chair and vice chair, who are volunteer community members, much like yourselves serving on that group, have expressed a desire to be collaborative during the meeting on Monday. So you're able to work with them, bring them back if you so choose, and talk to them more.
Thank you. Commissioner Lovisa, you had your hand
Oh,
first.
sure. I was just going to reply to Angie's question. Yeah, Data Crush is sort of, it's a little bit of what Candace Avalos, I think, was talking about with CRC, the 1,000 or 2,000 page files that you get, and sometimes you don't always have an enormous amount of time to review it. And then with body cam footage, I mean, I've reviewed a lot of body cam footage in my life, and it's a very lengthy process. There is sometimes software that can help, but you could easily be looking at many hours of footage. So yeah, I think it kind of ties into another issue, which is caseloads, and maybe starting to think about what are humane caseloads for the people who will be working on this board.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Debbie, please.
So thinking about barriers, I think Commissioner Lovisa mentioned this. I'm just going to build on it. It's the fact that the Police Review Board, because it's private, you know, I think people have a lack of trust in what goes on because you can't really see, you know, what's happening behind the scenes. And also the fact that a majority of the people on the Police Review Board are police is the other thing that, you know, that obviously concerns people. And then one thing I thought about when Ume, I think his last name's Delgado, the CRC rep, was talking the other night was, and Commissioner Handelman asked about, I think it was him who asked about kind of the trauma from reading the files on the shootings and you know, looking at the photos and everything else. And I was wondering if the people on the new oversight board might have access to like that employee assistance program that city employees have, because I thought that might be a good resource for them if after doing a shooting, they felt the need to talk to a professional, that it would be great if the city could provide that. So a couple ideas, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Catherine and then Commissioner Sima.
Thank you. I wanted to just skip back to the discussion of what our work will do in terms of replacing the current system. In addition to the IPR and the CRC, is it contemplated that our recommendations will also replace or do away with the PRB? I guess that's a question potentially for
Samir.
Yeah,
Samir.
Yeah, Samir can.
that's up to you. So it is within your realm within your options to suggest such a thing. IPR, CRC, internal affairs, PRB, all of the parts of the current system.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Commissioner Sima and then Commissioner Eric.
Yeah, actually, it kind of follows Commissioner Catherine and Commissioner May. It's just, it'd be clarifying to be able to know that the PRB, the Portland, or the Police Review Board is internally housed within the Portland Police Bureau. Same as IA, the internal affairs. So the functions are IPR, independent police review, which is what we're actually putting together independently. And then the police review board, which is strictly under the umbrella of PPB, along with internal affairs. And then you have the CRC, which is the Citizens Review Committee, which is under the city auditor. And that's how these are all placed. And that would also kind of help us understand exactly like where we are within this process and how important our process is in the scope of things.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. Commissioner Eric, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think the two big takeaways I had from hearing from folks Monday was both revolved around making sure we recognize that people that are doing this work are human beings, right? And so I think as Sophia mentioned and Debbie seconded, you know, access to supports to help them digest what they're being asked to deal with, right? As if it's just no big deal. It's traumatic, and they need to be able to digest it and adjust it and then recover from it. It's trauma for them that they will then take into their work if they don't address. The second thing is one where the city could really help is I heard that reason that people were doing so much work in the afternoons, that only a few people could do it, is that they had to be there with city employees on their time, right? And so, Samir works at night, right? So, I mean, they could define people that could do this work and help them do this work at times when it's more convenient to the commission, instead of saying, hey, let's follow the base schedule and sort of fit your volunteer work into what we actually have control over and setting the schedules for city employees. So those are two things that I really thought were important.
Thank you, Commissioner Eric. And I also have a comment for Commissioner May. She say, I echo the same as everyone has mentioned. I'm concerned about members of the community being recruited from their expertise and qualifications and not being compensated well for the same types of resources that employees receive. Thank you, Commissioner. And now we'll pass it to Commissioner Dan.
Hi, yes, thanks. So one of the things that CRC mentioned that was brought up by the audience was the standard of review, which right now for the CRC when they're hearing appeals is deferential to the police. And that's also the standard that the city council uses when they hear the appeal of the appeal. I mean, I'm sure we're gonna have a longer discussion at some point about what makes something an appellate body or not. And I don't want to get into that right now, but that's just one of the things that stuck out to me, that standard of review right now is a threshold problem. The mayor mentioned due process, which is, I think, generally speaking, we all agree is a good thing, especially for community members. But there's what he sort of minimized what he said about this due process hearing that can happen. I think we need to read more about that. And my understanding from the research that I've done is that there's a thing that's called a Loudermill hearing based on the name of a Supreme Court case that gives public employees the right to appeal the outcome of a disciplinary function. So that's one of the things I was asking about, is how come some of the discipline that these review boards, including city council, put forward ended up not being imposed. And I don't, because it's not transparent, we don't know if that's what caused those changes. And my last comment is just about the transition plan. One of the things we're charged with, and that makes me anxious, is making a transition plan between the IPR and the new system. Like, are some of the people who are on staff there going to work on the new board? Are some of the CRC members going to be able to transition to be board members on the new board? I don't know the answers to those questions, but it is something, as we are moving forward and as we look at the new system, that's something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Connie?
Yeah, I second Dan's sort of concerns there. Sorry, my power surged, so I was kicked off as Samir was explaining, but I think I caught the gist that we are to eventually absorb these other organizations and become, sort of one bigger version of the existing. So I'm a little wondering, like, why we aren't maybe taking a little bit more of a page from what the work of these organizations have done. And is it clear to them that that's happening? Because as they were speaking to us last week, it didn't seem like that was transparent.
Thank you, Commissioner Connie. Any other question or comment before we take public meeting? Yeah, Commissioner Debbie?
This is terrible. I can't remember. Have we had a briefing as a group of exactly what was in that ballot measure that we voted for? Because I think maybe that would kind of clear up a little bit of this. We're not being sure about what the point of what we're doing is. So I think if we haven't had one, it'd be great to get somebody in here to explain it to us, so we have it in our head exactly what it is we're supposed to be doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. And Samir just copied the ballot measure on the chat. That way everyone can access the document and review it too. But it's a good idea also if somebody comes and explain it. That's a very good idea. Okay, Commissioner Angie.
I do feel like one of the barriers that we have is staying focused as possible, because I know that we all have a lot of passion for this issue, as we should, but that sometimes things, sometimes our attention or our focus might get a little bit, might sway a bit. So maybe going over what our intentions are, or what our goals are, or our success criteria are once every 5 meetings might be a good thing. Or if we commit to doing that outside of the meeting before the meeting starts, or put it in the agenda for us to read ahead of time, something like that. But I do think that it's easy to hear our stories, or hear these stories and hear testimony, but then not keep our focus quite as much as we would like to sometimes. So anyway, that's the one barrier. I missed Monday's meeting and I'm sorry. And so I don't have any comment about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Angie. And I'm gonna read the question and comment that is in the public, and it's from Philip Shaka. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your last name, but it say, I don't doubt that some people have left police oversight groups because their pro-police views weren't welcome. I know of many people who left Portland police oversight groups because the city doesn't welcome or respond well to the criticism or recommendations that will make the police change the way they do things. Will it be helpful to do a survey or former police oversight community group members in Portland and ask why they decide to leave, so we can have a true accounting? Thank you. Thank you for the question. Okay, Commissioner Lovisa.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to say, first, thank you, everyone. I kind of feel like we have almost 2 different conversations going on right now. One is about barriers to police accountability, and the other is about barriers to us knowing how to do our work correctly. And I think those are both very important conversations to have. I do have a couple more barriers to police accountability notes from Monday that I just wanted to go over and kind of put into the record. And I think that they're somewhat related. Number 1 was from IPR. I think it was Ross mentioned that the number 1 reason why things are closed administratively is that they do not violate policy. And a second barrier is that IPR currently cannot search for police reports themselves. They must make a request for those reports, and that creates friction, I believe is the term that they used. So I wanted to put that out there as a barrier to police accountability. Seems to be this friction between the systems and the police.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. Commissioner Sophia?
Just to add or to clarify or get some more information, I guess, from what Commissioner Lovisa said. I can't remember the details, but I was concerned about the data, but I did think that there was maybe some solution to that would allow our members, I mean, maybe we have to write this into being, but to make sure that we have access to all of the police databases and training on how to use all of those databases and not have to ask them for copies of anything. We should be able to directly go in there. Of course, we have to have the training and all the other things that we need to ensure that the privacy is kept. But I don't think we should have to ask them. I think we should have access to the same databases as they do, all of them. So that's a suggestion. And I think that was something that was somewhat mentioned, but I just don't remember the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Dan?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think it sounds like we might be having some people come back, and I don't know. I think there was some discussion about following up with IPR about questions we had. So I don't know if anybody was tracking any of the questions that came up just now. But when I asked Director Caldwell whether the law that was passed gave IPR access to the files directly, he seemed to say that they were on track to do that through some agreement with the Oregon State Police. But something I heard earlier, and I was hoping he was going to address this, made me believe that there's also some barrier that has to do with federal law around accessing police files. And so I'm hoping we can ask him about that so we can learn if that's a barrier that we're going to have to face for the new when the new system's designed.
Thank you, Commissioner Tan. Commissioner Sophia? You are in mute.
From what Commissioner Dan said, I'm getting a little bit, so my memory is being coming back a little bit. And I do remember they did say that that was on track, and then they were changing. There was some DOJ something or another to change because it was considered criminal something, and they said that they were going to get, or they were trying to get that change so that they could get into those records. And I think it was in the documents that they provided. I'll just have to go back and look at the documents, but I remember seeing that in the documents that was in our readings before. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Debbie?
So one of the things I think of as best practices, I remember over the years hearing IPR sort of slowly incorporate more ways to make complainants feel comfortable with the process. And, you know, I remember them talking about how if somebody was uncomfortable coming into City Hall to file a complaint, they could do it by email, they could do it on the telephone, or they would even meet them off-site if necessary, you know, and have a one-on-one conversation with them outside of a public building. And so I often thought that seemed like a really, you know, kind thing to do. And then the other thing that happened over the years too is, you know, these people would come who had complained and they wanted to have an appeal hearing, and there they are in this room, and they've got all the CRC up there, they got the IPR staff, they got the internal affairs over there, and it appeared to me it would be a very intimidating thing, and there you are yourself, you know. So eventually they allowed the National Lawyers Guild volunteers to come and help appellants. And then they took the next step and had former CRC members act as they call them appeals process advisors. And so they can sit with them and help them and coach them ahead of time. And eventually they let the appeals process advisors actually read the file before the hearings. And so they have slowly, incrementally, I feel, made the experience better for appellants by giving them more assistance and more information. So I think that's something that we should keep in mind about. We don't want community members who file complaints to be sort of left on their own, you know, to face the system that is probably kind of scary. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Lovisa?
Oh, I just wanted to say I agree with Debbie. And also, I can't remember what the term was, but there was an advocate of some kind that was mentioned, I think, by...
That's called the Appeals Process Advisor, APA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Catherine?
Thank you. So I know you might have raised this before I got back from the break about just the lack of transparency as a barrier. I mean, that certainly came up, and I think Debbie's comment about the awkwardness of the CRC process for the complainants points that out. Can you tell me, Debbie, the advisor gets to look at the file, but not the complainant? Is that how it works?
That's right, because all of the appeals process advisors are former CRC members. And so they have had a background check and have sworn to confidentiality because those files are confidential. And so they trust them because it's a whole investigative file. So it's all the witness statements and photographs and videos, and it could be all sorts of stuff, but they're, you know, it's related to somebody's employment. And so they're confidential. And CRC members, like I said, have already been cleared and been sworn to confidentiality, where the appellant is just, you know, a regular person who had an unfortunate situation with a police officer. And so they don't trust them to have access to those files. So does that, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I understand that it
yeah.
does not make sense to me that the complainant would not have access to the file about his or her case. So it just seems like if we're talking about due process, that's a pretty significant lack of due process for you not to be able to see your own case file. It's just,
Yeah. Well, definitely
so
something for us to think about.
I think so. I think that, and I mean, that plus the secrecy around the PRB, it just seemed very problematic to me. Both the secrecy of the process itself, it seems like some kind of star chamber, and then that the results are not even made public. I mean, that also, you know, how can anybody have confidence in a process that where they don't know what has happened, what is happening, how a decision was reached, and then don't even know what decision was reached. I mean, that it just feels like if we're talking about due process, I mean, that works both ways. It's not just to protect the person accused of misconduct, but also there should be some due process for the folks who are bringing these complaints so they know what's happening to their file and what the resolution of their case was. So anyway, I'm kind of shocked by the lack of transparency in the process. And I assume some of that is, we're going to need to look at where that's contractually driven, where that is just not something that can be worked around. But I think to the extent we can look at ways to work around that and eliminate that barrier, I think that would certainly create more trust in the process.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. And I'm gonna read a comment from Commissioner Tirsa. She says, something that stood out to me as a barrier stated from CRC was the lack of communication from the Bureau prior to a comment or review. CRC expressed oftentimes not given enough time for preparation. Thank you very much. And now I'm gonna pass it to Commissioner Dan.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification on Commissioner Tirsa's comment that was made about when the police are reviewing policy issues, and that is a very long-standing problem where they give you 15 days to review some policies, 30 days to review others, and if there's a group that's meeting once a month, that's very difficult to achieve. But also just to clarify something that Commissioner McDowell said, the appellant, I think this is what the IPR director said, is that the appellant does get a letter at the end of the process saying what the outcome was. So that is revealed to them, or the complainant does, not if they appeal. So it's very, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. Anyway, so the complainant does get a letter at the end of the process saying what happened. It may not include exactly what the punishment was. The Police Review Board does put out reports. They're very heavily redacted, so you can barely even tell what happened or who the person was that filed the complaint or what the officers were doing, except in deadly force cases where there's a little bit more transparency, but not much. But those include the outcome. Those include what the recommendations were for the discipline and then what the final discipline was decided. And that was one of the things I was commenting on to the mayor, how some of the things that city council, our elected city council voted on ended up not having the same discipline that should have happened based on their vote. And the current system imagines that the city council has the final say on what the findings are going to be. So that's something that I think is a barrier that, if the most high authority says this is what the discipline should be, and then that's not what happens, that's a barrier, I think.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, I mean, I put it in the chat, but I was thinking, like in civil rights cases, and usually they have a counselor, right, for complainants, right? You're usually assigned a person who takes you through that complaint process. So my comment in the chat was basically, is there a way for us to have something like that for the people who put in complainants? They're assigned a sort of a case number. It's always followed. it's followed through with, they have somebody to talk to about it, to help them gather fact-finding information and things like that. Because sometimes when people put in the complaint, they don't really know what they need. So if we have some kind of counselor or advocate or manager for intake or something of that sort, I was thinking that that might be really helpful to the people who put in the complaints. And if that could possibly be done through some type of independent organization, such as one of those places that have alternative dispute resolution kind of places, one of those type of counselors. Because I know there's various businesses that do that around the city. And then the people can go to them. It's not in the police, it's not in the police, anything that deals with the police. It's a person who's looking at this without any supposedly background information, any biases. They're just taking in information. And if those persons, could do those complaint processes and follow them through, we can track them that way. That's just a thought.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. And I'm gonna read another comment from the public, and it's from Jasmine, and she say, I don't know what she say. I think there is a lot to be learned from the CRC, but in many ways the CRC only exists because the public lacks input into the accountability process generally. It may be helpful to consider yourselves as replacing the PRB as opposed to the CRC. Thank you. We have a little bit of time for another comment, a couple of comments. Is there any comment or question? Yes, Commissioner Christian?
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure, yes.
Cool. Yeah, I just want to say that I agree with a lot of things that everyone's been saying. I noticed something that sticks out to me between all the barriers that have kind of been getting brought up is that they all sort of serve, and this is like no surprise, but like I think it's important that it gets kind of pointed out or like said or discussed or thought about. They all sort of serve to give the police ways out of accountability a little bit, like the lack of transparency or like them not showing up to cases and then not really, there's no repercussion for that as far as I can tell. Or like people who file complaints or whatever, it's not being like very user friendly. I guess that's kind of a colloquially like a really basic way to say it. But yeah, basically I just kind of thought that that's an interesting thing. And I feel like going forward, that's be something good to keep in mind. Because I know that the mayor mentioned that, and I think other city councilors too have mentioned that they want us to take in opinions that are different from ours or opinions directly from like the police bureau. But I think someone else said it in the chat too, like and someone else said it too when they were talking about people leaving the police community or police oversight committees because they feel that they're not being supported when they have pro-police views. That typically, obviously that's going to happen because the police oversight is kind of trying to make them to change their ways in some ways. And I'll stop talking, sorry, I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Commissioner Christian. Thank you. And Commissioner Sophia, and after your comment, Commissioner Sophia, we will go to public comment.
Okay, I just want to say thanks, Christian. It was so nice hearing from you. I want to hear from you some more. I just had a thought. It's a big idea. We were discussing about how we might, this is a volunteer and how we might be supported. And I'm just thinking out loud about some of the ways that we could be supported as volunteers. And I'm looking at, the military, the people in the reserve, they get so much time off from their work. And this is, everyone works at a different place, I know, but if there was some kind of, I don't want to say state law, but some way we could have this leave of absence that's excused if you're on a commission, similar to if you're on a jury, like jury duty, something of that nature, to kind of help us when we're, we're doing this is extra work, right? So if it's been looked at as similar to jury duty, we could make something to help us along in that sense, especially with our work. It would give us some credibility if we need to take some time off during work time. It will also give us some, I think there's supposed to be some type of stipends or something. Anyway, that's just a thought. It's just a method, a means to an end, possibly, just an idea. So I just wanted to put that out to the group for thought.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Okay, I will go to Commissioner Lovisa and then to public comment. Go ahead. Public comment.
I just wanted to sum up. That's a very creative suggestion, Sophia. Wow. Radical ideas. I just wanted to sum up some of the things that I was hearing in terms of especially barriers. It's obviously complexity. It's an enormously complex system. The lack of transparency, it's obviously quite opaque. It's not user friendly. Thank you, Christian. That's actually great framing on that. And it seems like the current system is not humane to the volunteers or workers who work within it. So thanks everyone for kind of giving a lot of really great ideas, and I think we can talk about this, in particular the subject that's come up many times tonight of volunteers versus paid employees. I think it's going to be a really rich conversation to have at a later point.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. Now we will take public comment on the issues the PAC is discussing, and community members can also tell their story about policing or police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 2 minutes in length at most and raise their hand in Zoom if you like to speak. Now I call members of the public to either share their story or comments or questions about the discussion today. Just tell the story. Okay, I don't see anybody that wants to. Oh,
we
okay.
have Jasmine.
Oh, Jasmine. Oh, I see. Jasmine, thank you.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, nice to see you all. You can't see me. I also have my camera taped, so it's not just because of the format. I wanted to ask if it seems like there's a lot of different experience levels on this committee with sort of like the history of accountability in the city of Portland and some of the more overarching challenges. I'm wondering if anybody on the committee can think of a time when a member of the Portland Police Bureau was meaningfully held accountable in the current system.
I would refer to our resident historian, Dan Handelman.
Thank you. Commissioner Dan, do you recall?
We don't always respond to audience questions, but
yes.
Well, there's times that officers, what we say a lot in our group that I'm in, is that officers often get held accountable for lying, stealing, cheating, and sexual misconduct. It's almost never for violence that they use against community members, and it's surely almost never for racial profiling or other discrimination. So those kinds of officers, often the police union itself, and I use union loosely, won't even step up to defend them because they don't want to have them around anymore when they lie, steal, cheat, or engage in sexual misconduct. So there have been officers who have been held accountable for those kinds of behaviors.
Thank you, Commissioner Dunn, and thank you, Jasmine, for your comments and your questions. They're very well appreciated. Then we go to next steps, and I will pass it to the co-chairs. But we have only 4 minutes, but.
Okay, well, I think it's obviated somewhat by who's here in the room. We were going to talk really quickly about subcommittees. Subcommittees are sort of the upcoming the bifurcation of our work, and we will be having the first meeting of the research subcommittee next Thursday, and community engagement events sometime after that. And I think that we are not quite at a stage yet where we have enough of a critical mass to do I think approve is the language that we use in the bylaws for approving co-chairs for subcommittees. But if you are interested in being a co-chair for the subcommittees, please, please, please let us know. We would love to have you.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. And there is also, it's a comment that's from Jasmine. It says, thanks, Dan. So it seems like PPA might be another significant barrier to accountability. Thank you. And I will pass to Dr. Christine Moses. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Catherine.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question. Have subcommittees been appointed yet? I'm confused about that.
No, not yet, but I will let co-chair Commissioner Lovisa. If you can answer.
Well, I'm not quite sure. Let me defer to staff on this. Is appointed the right word?
Under the bylaws, either the full commission or the co-chairs can create subcommittees. The co-chairs created subcommittees and sent out some information on those. Members can volunteer to be on subcommittees. Several members have volunteered to be on subcommittees. So there is a starting membership. There are many members who have not responded yet. So that'll be discussed at there'll be more discussion later on. It's on future agendas. And but yeah, there's no appointment process for membership on a subcommittee. It's just volunteering to be on it, although membership is tracked to ensure quorum as per the bylaws.
Thank you, Samir. And is 8:59? We only have a couple of seconds. I don't know. Christine, do you have things in the parking lot? Recap.
I do not have things in the parking lot.
Thank you. Then thank you everyone for this meeting. Thank you for being here, for your time and your dedication. It is 9 p.m. on May 26th, and it's the time to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. Good night.